Here are Grandma's 31 useful sourdough hacks you'll wish you knew sooner. Start a wild starter with just flour and water. It might seem magical, but all you need to begin sourdough is flour and water, nothing more. Grandma used to stir it in a wide-mouthed jar every morning and let it sit near the back of the stove. Wild yeast and bacteria already exist in the flour and the air. When mixed and fed, they start bubbling within days. Use filtered or dechlorinated water for best results. Let the mixture breathe with a cloth cover. Stir daily to prevent separation. Don't refrigerate early. Let it mature. Try placing the jar in a turned-off oven with the light on for steady warmth. Use the lazy man's method. Grandma always believed in working smarter, not harder, especially with sourdough. The lazy man's method means mixing ingredients and letting time do the heavy lifting. Skip intensive kneading by combining flour, water, starter, and salt in a bowl and letting it sit for hours. Occasional folds replace hard labor. The dough builds structure naturally through fermentation and rest. Use a wet hand to gently fold every 30 minutes, 60 minutes. A long, cold, fridge-proof overnight develops flavor and strength. This approach is great for busy or older bakers. Use oiled containers for easy release after bulk fermentation is complete. Use whole grain or rye flour early on. Did you know that whole grain and rye flours are naturally richer in wild yeast than white flour? That's why sourdough starters tend to ferment more quickly and reliably when these flours are used in the first few days. Their coarse texture and bran layers encourage microbial growth. Switching to white flour is fine later, but early feeding with whole grains helps build strong yeast colonies. If rye flour isn't available, whole wheat is a strong second choice. Always measure by weight, not cups. Keep notes on which flours yield more rise or tang in your starter's early life. Feed your starter once a day, even if inconsistently. Back in the day, Grandma wasn't strict with times, but she always gave her starter a scoop of flour and water daily. A sourdough starter doesn't demand perfect timing, just regular nourishment. Even if you're a few hours off schedule, daily feeding keeps the microbes alive and active. It's best to discard half before feeding to keep the acidity balanced. Use a kitchen scale for precision. If bubbles slow down, feed it twice daily until it perks up. If the starter smells strongly like vinegar, feed with a bit more water to reduce acidity and encourage yeast activity. Don't discard starter too early. It's tempting to toss a slow or smelly starter, but patience pays off. During the first week, your mixture may smell unpleasant or show little activity. This is normal. The good microbes are still battling early bacteria. Stir it daily, keep feeding it, and don't judge too soon. Many beginners toss a starter that would have turned lively on day 8 or 9. You'll know it's alive when it doubles in size within 4 to 6 hours of feeding. Keep it in a warm spot. If mold forms, that's different. Then you'll need to start fresh and sanitize your container. Use water at room temperature or slightly warm. Cold water slows down fermentation, while water that's too hot can kill your wild yeast. Aim for water between 75 degrees Fahrenheit or 24 degrees Celsius to 85 degrees Fahrenheit or 29 degrees Celsius when feeding your starter. This creates an ideal environment for bacteria and yeast to thrive. Room temperature is generally fine, but in winter, you might want to warm the water slightly by letting it sit near a warm appliance or sunlit window. Never microwave it in plastic containers. If you're unsure, test it with your wrist, like baby formula. Adjust flour hydration to match warmer temperatures since fermentation speeds up and can dry the mix faster. Always salt the dough. Salt isn't just for flavor. It strengthens gluten, regulates yeast, and improves structure. When omitted, your dough can overproof quickly, becoming sticky and flat. The right ratio is usually 2% of your flour weight. Always mix salt after your autolyse, the flour and water rest, to avoid interfering with gluten development. Dissolve it into a bit of water and knead it evenly throughout the dough. If using coarse salt, grind it slightly first. Keep it away from direct contact with yeast when first mixing. Try sea salt for added minerals, but avoid iodized salt, which can affect fermentation balance. Let dough rest or autolyse. Letting your flour and water sit before adding anything else might feel like wasted time, but it transforms your dough's performance. This step, called autolyse, activates enzymes that begin breaking down starches and proteins, enhancing gluten formation without mixing. You'll notice your dough becomes easier to handle, more elastic, and less sticky. The final bread has improved texture, structure, and flavor. Just mix flour and water until shaggy, cover, and wait 30 to 60 minutes before adding salt and starter. For whole grain flour, Grandma advised to stick to the shorter end to avoid over-softening. Keep the dough in a warm, draft-free spot. If you can't knead much due to strength or time, autolyse will do some of the work for you. To maximize hydration, stir the water in slowly and scrape down dry bits along the bowl during the mix. Use stretch and folds instead of kneading. Skip the long kneading sessions and rely on stretch and folds to build your dough's strength. This technique gently layers gluten development over time during bulk fermentation. To perform one, grab the dough from one edge, stretch it upward without tearing, and fold it over itself. Rotate the bowl and repeat 3 more times. Do this every 30 minutes for 2 to 3 hours. You'll feel the dough firm up with each round. This method preserves open crumb and structure, making your loaf airy and light. Keep your hands damp to reduce sticking. If your dough is very wet, extra folds may help. A clear container can help track rise progress as the dough strengthens. Cover the bowl in between folds to prevent drying and maintain a warm environment. Add a gentle coil fold at the end for improved shaping readiness. Mist dough before baking for extra crust shine. Right before sliding your dough into the oven, give it a quick mist of water using a spray bottle. This helps create steam on the surface, which delays crust hardening and allows for better oven spring. The moisture also enhances shine and encourages a crispier finish. Mist lightly. Too much water can make the dough soggy or cause blisters. If you don't have a spray bottle, you can flick water with your fingers or brush it gently on top. Combine misting with a preheated Dutch oven or baking stone for maximum effect. For an even shinier loaf, mist halfway through the bake as well, but avoid opening the oven too often to maintain heat. Use a Dutch oven or covered pot. For bakery-style crust at home, a Dutch oven makes all the difference. The heavy enclosed pot traps steam released from the dough, which helps your crust expand before hardening. That burst of moisture also gives the crust its shine and chewy texture. Preheat the Dutch oven for at least 30 minutes before placing your dough inside. Place the dough on parchment for easier transfer. Cover during the first 20 minutes of baking, then remove the lid to brown and crisp the crust. If you don't have a Dutch oven, an oven-safe pot with a tight lid can still work. Avoid glass lids that might crack under high heat. Use parchment to lift your dough in and out safely and prevent sticking. For extra safety, place your Dutch oven on a baking sheet to protect your oven from drips. Bake in hotter ovens initially, then lower. Start your bake with high heat to encourage oven spring, then reduce the temperature to finish the bake without burning. The first 10 to 15 minutes in a hot oven, typically around 475 degrees Fahrenheit, or 246 degrees Celsius, allow the dough to rapidly expand while steam helps the crust form. After this initial burst, lower the oven to around 425 degrees Fahrenheit or 218 degrees Celsius to bake through evenly. Too much time at high heat can lead to overly dark crusts or underbaked interiors. If you're using a Dutch oven, remove the lid at this stage to finish the crust. A thermometer can help monitor internal doneness. Look for 200 degrees Fahrenheit or 93 Celsius inside the loaf. Adjust the initial high heat depending on your oven's strength. Use an oven thermometer to ensure accurate readings, as most ovens fluctuate. Always preheat your oven for at least 45 minutes to ensure consistent bottom heat and even baking. Float test for starter readiness. Did you know that a healthy sourdough starter floats in water when it's ready to use? This float test is a quick and reliable way to gauge fermentation activity. After feeding your starter, wait 4 to 6 hours for peak bubbling and activity. Take a spoonful and gently drop it into a glass of water. If it floats, it's airy and active, ready for baking. If it sinks, wait longer or try feeding again. Starters may behave differently based on temperature and feeding ratios, so observe yours over several days. Avoid testing straight from the fridge. It needs to be at room temperature. If your kitchen is cool, place the starter in a warm cabinet or near a warm appliance. Keep your jar loosely covered to allow airflow and avoid pressure buildup. Clean the edges regularly to prevent dry crusts from falling in. Let dough proof until visibly puffy. Your dough should rise until it's noticeably fuller and puffy, not just by the clock, but by look and feel. Proofing times vary depending on room temperature, flour type, and hydration. Watch for visual cues. The dough should wobble slightly, hold its shape when poked, and feel airy but structured. Overproofing leads to collapse, while underproofing gives dense loaves. Use the poke test. A gentle finger press should leave a slow-filling indentation. If the dough springs back too fast, it needs more time. Cover with a damp towel to prevent drying. Drafty rooms can delay fermentation, so aim for a stable, warm environment. If proofing overnight, refrigerate in a container with room to expand. Use a clear container to see bubble development from the side, which is helpful for tracking progress and adjusting your timing for future batches. If dough seems sluggish, give it more time. Sometimes sourdough doesn't rise as quickly as expected, and that's perfectly normal. Fermentation speed depends on temperature, flour type, hydration level, and the activity of your starter. If your dough still feels dense and shows little puffiness, patience is key. Rushing it leads to dense, flat bread. Letting the dough rest longer at room temperature or moving it to a slightly warmer area can help revive activity. Avoid adding more flour out of impatience, as this can stiffen the dough. Using a clear container can help you visually track bubble formation and expansion. Don't base your rise time solely on a clock. Always look at the dough itself. For sluggish starters, give them a warm feed earlier in the day to build more strength. Use sourdough discard for pancakes, etc. Rather than tossing leftover sourdough discard, use it to make delicious pancakes, waffles, muffins, crackers, and more. This not only reduces waste, but adds tang and depth to your recipes. Discard still contains active bacteria and wild yeast, which contribute subtle flavor and a slight rise. Combine it with flour, eggs, milk, or whatever recipe base you prefer. If it smells too sour or alcoholic, feed it before using, or only use part of it. Store discard in the fridge if you're collecting it over several days. You can freeze it too, in small portions for later use. Always mark your jar's date to keep track of freshness. For extra flavor, let your pancake batter rest 30 minutes before cooking, so the bubbles develop more. Save a bit of old dough, or mother dough. Keeping a small piece of dough from one bake to carry into the next is an age-old technique known as mother dough. This traditional method adds consistent flavor and fermentation strength to new batches. The retained dough has built up acids, enzymes, and structure that can jumpstart fermentation. Wrap it tightly and refrigerate until needed, then mix into your fresh dough during the first stage. It should only make up 10 to 20% of the new batch for best balance. Using mother dough can reduce proofing time and deepen crust color naturally. Avoid using overproofed leftovers as their strength diminishes. You can even freeze a portion and revive it later. Sprinkle a bit of flour on your saved dough before wrapping to prevent sticking or spoiling. Use bran or whole wheat for flavor. Adding even a small amount of bran, whole wheat, or freshly milled flour can noticeably deepen your sourdough's flavor. These flours contain more nutrients and natural oils which feed the wild yeast and bacteria, resulting in a more complex profile. A little goes a long way. Start with 10 to 30% of your total flour weight. Whole grains can speed up fermentation, so monitor proofing more closely. You may need slightly more water as bran absorbs moisture quickly. Toasting your bran before mixing can introduce a nutty, roasted flavor. Sift out coarse bran and use it to coat your banneton to prevent sticking. Always store whole grain flour in a cool place, as its natural oils can spoil over time. Try blending rye with white flour for a sweet-sour balance. Don't overwork the dough. Overhandling your dough during bulk fermentation can break down gluten structure and release too much trapped gas. While stretch and folds are essential, they should be spaced and gentle. The dough should feel alive, light, elastic, and puffy, not deflated from constant manipulation. Stop touching it once it holds its shape and jiggles slightly when moved. Dough continues developing on its own as it rests, so excessive kneading or poking interrupts natural fermentation. If your dough starts tearing instead of stretching, give it more rest. Light oiling of your hands and bowl helps reduce sticking and stress on the dough. Always use visual cues instead of assuming it needs just one more fold. If you're unsure, it's better to underhandle than overwork your dough. Let loaves cool completely before slicing. Did you know that cutting into a sourdough loaf before it cools can ruin the texture? As it cools, steam redistributes within the crumb, setting its structure and enhancing flavor. Cutting too early releases moisture too fast, resulting in a gummy center. Even though it smells amazing, resist the urge and wait at least 90 minutes. A cooled loaf slices clean without sticking to your knife. Place it on a wire rack for air circulation underneath. Never wrap a hot loaf in plastic or cloth. For a crisp crust, reheat slices in a toaster or oven before serving to refresh the surface. Proof loaves in bannetons or floured bowls. When it comes to final proofing, shaping your dough in a banneton or a floured bowl helps maintain structure and gives a professional finish. Bannetons support the dough while it rises, encouraging vertical lift instead of flattening out. Dust with rice flour to prevent sticking and preserve the surface pattern. If you don't have one, a metal or glass bowl works well with a thick layer of cloth and flour. Always chill-shape dough before baking to hold its shape better. For best results, invert gently onto parchment paper. A sprinkle of semolina flour also prevents sticking to surfaces. Use tea towel and bowl if no banneton. You don't need fancy tools to make good sourdough. Just line a bowl with a tea towel and dust it heavily with flour. This budget-friendly solution works just as well for proofing dough when you lack a banneton. Choose a towel without deep fibers so it doesn't cling to the dough. Rice flour, or a mix of rice and wheat flour, helps prevent sticking during the rise. Flip the dough onto parchment for a gentle transfer. Always flour the seam side, not just the towel. Let it rest uncovered in the fridge for added surface tension before baking. Use ambient warmth for proofs. Harnessing ambient heat from your kitchen helps maintain consistent fermentation without gadgets. Place your dough near a warm appliance or inside the oven with the light on. Avoid hot spots or direct heat, which can create crusty patches or kill yeast. Proofing at 75 to 80 degrees Fahrenheit or 23 to 26 degrees Celsius typically yields optimal rise without rushing the process. Cover with a damp towel or lid to prevent surface drying. Avoid using a microwave or stovetop for warmth unless monitored. Draft-free spaces like inside an empty microwave or cooler also work. Always check with a finger poke test for proofing progress instead of using time alone. Use less starter if you want more sour. Cutting back on the amount of starter can actually make your sourdough tangier. Less starter means the dough takes longer to ferment, giving wild yeasts and bacteria more time to create that classic sour flavor. Instead of speeding things up, slowing down brings complexity. Try using as little as 10% starter by flour weight for long, overnight rises. Use cooler room temps or fridge proofing to extend fermentation further. The acidity intensifies as time passes, enhancing taste without making the bread too dense. Keep your flour ratios consistent and test flavor at different intervals. A pinch of rye flour boosts sourness too. Dry or refrigerate starter if away. If you're leaving town for some time, you don't need to toss your starter. Just dry it or chill it. Drying involves spreading a thin layer on parchment and letting it air dry until brittle. Once dry, break it into flakes and store it in a sealed jar. To reactivate, simply rehydrate and feed over a few days. For short trips, refrigerate the starter in a sealed jar with a loose lid. Feed it once before storing and again when you return. Always discard the top layer if it smells off. Label the jar with the last feeding date. Add a rubber band 2-track rise line. Use simple 1-to-1 flour to water ratios. When feeding or starting your sourdough, keeping a 1-to-1 flour to water ratio by weight offers consistency and predictability. This is known as a 100% hydration starter. It produces a thick, pancake batter-like consistency that's easy to manage and perfect for most recipes. Use a kitchen scale, not measuring cups, for accuracy. Different flours absorb water differently, but 1-to-1 works well for all-purpose, bread or whole wheat flour. If you prefer a thicker starter, add slightly more flour. For thinner, add more water. Adjust only in small increments. Clean the sides of the jar after feeding to prevent dried crust from forming. Score with sharp shallow cuts. Scoring your dough is more than decoration. It guides how steam escapes and how the bread expands. Using a lame or a razor blade, slice the dough about 1/4 inch deep just before baking. Shallow, controlled cuts prevent the loaf from bursting randomly. The blade should glide smoothly, not drag. If your blade drags, wet it lightly or chill the dough slightly. You can create a single slash down the center or decorative patterns. Deeper cuts can collapse dough or overexpand the crust. Always score at an angle, not straight down. A light misting of water can help crust formation too. Brush loaf with water, milk, or egg wash. The surface finish of your loaf depends on what you brush it with. Water gives a crisp crust, milk adds softness and color, and egg wash provides shine and deep browning. Apply your chosen wash just before baking using a pastry brush. For seeded loaves, the liquid helps toppings stick better. Be careful not to deflate the dough with heavy brushing. For a rustic look, skip the wash and let natural flour dusting create texture. Add a pinch of salt or sugar to milk wash for enhanced crust flavor. Reapply halfway through baking for an extra golden crust. Thump bottom. Hollow sound means done. Oh. One of the oldest and most reliable ways to check if a loaf is baked through is the hollow thump test. Once your sourdough has finished its bake and cooled for just a few minutes, remove it from the Dutch oven or tray and turn it over. Tap the bottom gently with your knuckles. If it sounds hollow, your bread is likely fully baked inside. If the sound is dull, return it to the oven for 5 to 10 more minutes. Make sure to check crust color too. It should be a deep golden brown. The internal temperature should read around 200 to 210 degrees Fahrenheit or 93 to 99 degrees Celsius if you're using a thermometer. Let the loaf cool completely on a wire rack to avoid steam ruining the crust. Never slice hot bread. It messes with texture and moisture. For extra crispy crusts, leave the oven door ajar during the last few minutes of baking. Store starter in fridge if you bake less often. If you're not baking daily, keeping your starter in the fridge is an easy way to reduce feeding frequency. After feeding, let it sit at room temperature until bubbles form, then loosely cover and refrigerate. Cold slows fermentation, so once-a-week feedings are usually enough. When ready to bake, bring it out and let it warm to room temp before feeding. If there's hooch, dark liquid on top, pour it off and stir the rest. Use clear glass to monitor rise. Label the jar with date and feeding time to track freshness. Always feed twice before baking for better fermentation, some consistency, and oven spring. Observe dough by look and feel. Back in the day, Grandma didn't rely on timers. She used her eyes and hands to judge when dough was just right. Dough changes feel during fermentation, going from sticky to elastic, and she knew the sweet spot by heart. When poked, a ready dough should bounce back slowly, but not collapse. Grandma taught that dough tells its own story, and you learn to listen through touch. Transparent containers help show bubble development. Overproofing leads to deflation, so don't wait too long. Watch for subtle signs. Jiggle, rise, spring. Another tip is to gently press the dough with a damp fingertip to test readiness. Keep a simple baking journal. Tracking your sourdough baking helps you repeat success and avoid common pitfalls. Write down ingredients, room temperature, hydration percentage, fermentation time, and how the loaf turned out. You'll quickly notice patterns. Note if you used a banneton or regular bowl, what kind of flour, or how active the starter was. Including photos adds visual memory. Don't forget to log mistakes. They teach more than perfect bakes. Over time, you'll dial in the timing, shaping, and baking methods that suit your kitchen and climate. Even a basic spiral notebook will do. Use it to mark favorite techniques, formulas, or even tips you learn from others.